So when I refer to life review, typically I'm using that phrase to denote the general process of looking back to bring understanding to the present and the future. But under that umbrella might fall oral history, reminiscence, autobiography or guided autobiography, personal storytelling, structured life review, which is a very specific form of life review, and we're going to learn about tapestries today. Well, life review, the general process, is universal. It has gone on in one form or another since the beginning of humanity. Our ancestors certainly told stories as a way to pass down important information across generations. It's a function of our memory system, and so it has all of the benefits and the pitfalls of that memory system, the inaccuracies as well as the accuracies. Life review can have different purposes and goals. What I like about it is that the whole area is very flexible. Life review is not just for the old. However, the prospect of impending death, I think, brings focus to life review in a way that other life events do not. So the beginnings of life review really can date back in terms of the modern way of thinking to 1963. Robert Butler said that I conceive of life review as a naturally occurring universal mental process characterized by the progressive return to consciousness of past experiences, and particularly the resurgence of unresolved conflicts. Simultaneously and normally, these revived experiences and conflicts can be surveyed and reintegrated. Life review is about putting one's past into a present perspective. Butler, when he was writing in 1963, was writing at a time when psychodynamic and psychotherapy was very popular. Freud's influence was still there, and there's a little bit of that in here. And his belief is that it's possible in one's later years to understand one's life in a way that's healthy. Not necessarily to resolve past problems, but to put it into perspective. Life review is a looking back process that has been set in motion by looking forward to death, potentially proceeds toward personality reorganization. Thus, life review is not synonymous with, but includes reminiscence. It's important, I think, that we take a lifespan perspective when we think about life review, because we can review any phase of the life story, from the moment of birth until almost the moment of death. I put this picture of Madame Calment. She's the longest living documented individual. She died a number of years ago at age of 122. When you think about doing a life review with someone who's 120 years old, just imagine the depth and richness that one can traverse. The critical period for life review, believe it or not, is often between the ages of 15 and 30. And so researchers who study life review in terms of the quantity and quality of memories find something called the reminiscence bump. That this period between 15 and 30 seems to produce the richest recall of memories for someone in the latter stage of life at age 65 to 85. So in that looking back process that we do in preparation for death, that early life period is very important. You're really defining yourself in almost every aspect of your life at that time, aren't you? Yeah. And it's also an aspect of life that is so intense that during that period we're often not being very self-reflective. I'm making a generalization, of course, but there's a lot going on. And so it sort of makes some sense that that would be a period in life review that would particularly be meaningful. The StoryCorps project is an oral history project through the Library of Congress. If anyone listens to National Public Radio, you've certainly heard some of the StoryCorps interviews, and they're very powerful. And I would encourage you to take a look at their website, because much of the video content of their interviews are up on the web on every topic imaginable. Oral history is hot. The greatest generation is dying. World War II memories are receding into the past. This is the time when we're capturing these memories. There have been efforts to recall the Holocaust. Channel 9 KTC did a project on that not too long ago. With Ken Burns' film about World War II, interest in that experience has been really hot. So this is a resonating issue. Life review has many qualities. It's both accessible and it's enjoyable. Anybody can do it. It's both personal and communal. It doesn't have to be one individual. In fact, it is really the communal aspect that's probably most important. It operates on many levels. It can be historical, psychological, even existential. It builds a sense of coherence and continuity. We change remarkably over the course of our lifespan. Madame Calment was a very different person at 120 than she was at 20. There was 100 years in between. And yet she retained a sense of self. It confirms personal identity and it actually encourages feelings of self-worth. One of the fallacies in this area is to believe that older adults are not able to process the past or shouldn't process the past if the past is traumatic. Even the recall of a traumatic event in life can bring positive and self-worth feelings in the present. It empowers present coping and well-being by putting the past in context. And it transmits knowledge, values, and wisdom to the future. Because if you leave behind a tapestries book or a keepsake video, you are leaving something of yourself to that next generation. So I'm going to give you some oversimplified definitions. So oral history is really a retelling of specific events so as to leave a record for future generations. It is possible to participate in an oral history interview and really not interject yourself very much at all. It can be very factual. This is what happened at this time. This is what happened next. It can interject you as a person, but it doesn't have to. Reminiscence is a recalling of the past to bring meaning, understanding, or pleasure into the present life and or discourse with others. You've got a bunch of friends who gather once a month for breakfast at Denny's, and you talk about high school days. Well, that's reminiscence. It's informal, it's fun, it may bring out quite a bit of richness and color. Reminiscence can be intentional, but it doesn't have to be. But it's not comprehensive. It's usually event-specific. But the difference between reminiscence and oral history is reminiscence typically does bring in the personal, whereas oral history doesn't have to. Life review is typically an organized, intentional effort to recall one's life story and retell critical events and present interpretations. Now, in my framework of life review, I'm thinking about life review as more systematic. It's not just single event focused, but it's trying to get a sense of the whole life story. And the purpose of a life review intervention really is to bring understanding to the present. Guided autobiography, it's another model. It's typically organized in an intentional effort to recall one's life story and write down critical events and present interpretations. So whereas life review may be more oral, guided autobiography is intentional in terms of it being written and recorded in that way. Now, a video doesn't lie. It captures whatever's in front of it. The beauty of writing is that it can capture the essence of someone in a way that I think the starkness of video cannot. So life review is, I think, meaningful for everybody, but it has certain benefit, particularly for people facing terminal illness, as in hospice, people living in retirement and long-term care facilities who have the time and maybe the interest to do this, people living with significant losses. As we age, the losses that we experience in life mount up, and I think that there can be a lingering burden of grief from these losses. Life review is not grief therapy and shouldn't be considered that way. And yet, I think talking about these losses can be tangible and meaningful. Memory loss and dementia. Sometimes a person with moderate dementia may have difficulty interacting, not just sometimes, usually, difficulty interacting in present, but they often retain a wealth of information from their teens and earlier life years. Life review is a great way to engage a person with progressive dementia, bring meaning to their life. Persons with depression or anxiety, and many others. So life review can be either passive or active, intentional or incidental. It can involve facts, feelings, thoughts, interpretations, and or misrepresentations. I said that life review is a function of our memory system. Our memory is not like a video camera. Our memory is written down in chunks and stored actually in various places in the brain. Every time we recall a past event, we reconstruct that event. And it's that reconstruction process that is at the heart of life review. Now, what happens if you're sitting doing a life review interview with someone and they talk about that they were there the day that Kennedy was shot. They were standing on the grassy knoll. And they talk all about that experience. And the person is 45. Okay? They tell you all about the experience. Okay? You're laughing. And a difference between a clinical interview, for example, and life review is that we're not intending to correct misrepresentations. It is really that person's felt understanding and recalled understanding of their life that matters. And I gave a very extreme example. A more common example might be a World War II vet who talks about being in combat and yet they never left stateside. Okay? The facts don't matter. It's the person's present understanding and interpretation. It can be individual or group. It can be structured, semi-structured, or totally open. It can be recorded, or it can be given simply for the enrichment of that person with no record whatsoever. It can be clinical, or it can be educational. It can be for the individual, or really for the family and community. Older adults are able to talk about the tough stuff. You've got a little frail woman sitting in front of you. Oh, so cute. I'm being really obscene by saying that. Politically incorrect. You have all these warm feelings for that person. You have this positive grandmother transference. As the interviewer, I don't want to hurt her. I want to make her feel good. But she was raped when she was 13. And she wants to talk about it. You're going to talk about it because she wants to talk about it. But are you going to talk about the specific facts of the rape and exactly what happened moment to moment? No. One difference between a clinical interview and a life review is the purpose. So a clinical interview, the purpose is to find out the nitty-gritty, is to help the person in a psychotherapeutic way. In an educational intervention for life review, the goal is to put into present context, wow, this is an amazing story. And yet look at you now, you're 85 years old. I wondered how this experience shaped your life. You must have many strengths that got you to this point. Can you tell me about those? You see the difference? It's not emphasizing the trauma, it's emphasizing what the trauma did. In life review, the power resides with the reviewer, the person reviewing their life story, not with the interviewer. The reviewer dictates where you go. Now, of course, the interviewer has some expertise. They're going to help in this process. But unlike a clinical intervention and interview where the therapist has the power or the physician has the power, here the power must reside with the reviewer. It's their life. It's their story. The ultimate goal of life review is self-awareness and understanding. It's not to relive and completely close the door on past events and traumas. It's not usually possible to do that. And most people that enter life review don't necessarily want to do that anyway. In the class that we teach, one of the issues we talk about is when you have somebody that really does need to deal with these issues in a clinical framework, what do? Well, you ease them into that and you make a referral. Truth in life review is a relative term, as human recall is rarely accurate in a factual sense, and I've already covered this one. You go with the person. It takes two or more to do life review. It's about relationship. So life review can happen spontaneously with two strangers, but it often depends on relationship. Doing life review interviewing with a relative can be a double-edged sword, however. You know the person well, so you have a relationship, but you may also know the skeletons. You may also know when that person is not being factual, and you might be tempted to correct them. So sometimes a detailed life review intervention is better done with someone you don't know well. Barbara Haight talks about the interviewer as the therapeutic listener. And that's a phrase that I like because it emphasizes both the fact that life review is good, helpful, and that the main emphasis of the interviewer is to listen. And she also calls the person taking part as the reviewer, which I also like. Our approach involves a combination of oral history, reminiscence, and life review. We try to tell a full story, but we do it pretty quickly. We teach the students to do it in 1 or 2 one-hour interviews that we then edit on camera. But I want to make the distinction, because we do have some professionals in the audience. And in a clinical interview, the emphasis is primarily on the present and the future. What are the presenting symptoms and what's going on? How can we make you function better? In a life review interview, the emphasis is on the past. Whereas a clinical interview is symptom and problem focused, a life review interview is understanding and integration focused. where the therapeutic intent is purposeful in a clinical interview, it's really incidental in a life review interview. When you are purposely trying to make the person better, you've crossed the line. Power differential I've already talked about. The therapeutic listener or interviewer has the power in clinical intervention, but not in life review. In clinical interviewing, the self-narrative is really secondary. It really is, believe it or not. The clinician listens to the self-narrative and pulls out what the clinician believes is important towards a diagnosis and a treatment plan. Whereas the self-narrative is what it's about in life review. In a clinical interview, there's one-sided filtering and interpretation. Whereas in a life review interview, it's really about the relationship and the conversation. And an effective life review discussion has a great back and forth feel to it. Whereas a clinical interview results in recommendations and an intervention, we've already talked about the life review interview can have many different outcomes. James Buren is really the father of the guided life review movement. And his method of guided life review is written. Unlike the Tapestries model, it's self-written as opposed to other-written. And he frames the life story in terms of what he calls branching points. And so his life review intervention is organized not around a chronological story necessarily, but around these large branching points and themes. He likes metaphor. So if your life is like a river, what caused it to flow in the directions it did? Just imagine the kind of response that could come from a question like that. I'll give you a Barbara Haight question that I really think is kind of cool. Looking back on your childhood, what are some of the projects that you never finished? Odd question for life review, huh? But it's gotten you thinking. So sometimes the questions you ask can really be very meaningful. The goal is to be as open and allow that person to explain what's important. So I'm going to stop here.